The old-school bathroom on the second floor had always felt wrong. It wasn't just the flickering lights, the damp, moldy smell, or the way the mirrors always seemed a little too foggy, even when the air was dry. It was something deeper, something that made the teachers tell students to avoid using it if possible. No one really spoke about it directly, but the rumors were endless. Some said they had seen strands of wet black hair slithering out of the sink when they were alone. Others whispered about a pale face that sometimes surfaced in the water, its lips moving as if whispering something no one could hear. A few claimed to have seen a floating head drifting just above the stalls, its lifeless eyes watching them. Most dismissed it as a silly ghost story, something to scare the younger kids, but then, why did even the teachers seem uneasy? It started with little things. A girl named Aisha ran out of the bathroom screaming, saying she had heard someone whisper her name from the drain. Her friends laughed it off, but Aisha refused to use that bathroom again. A week later, a boy named Arman claimed he saw fingers pressing against the mirror from inside the glass. No one believed him until a teacher went in and came out pale as a sheet. She refused to say what she saw. Then came the hair. At first, it was just strands. Someone would be washing their hands, and suddenly, black hair would float up from the sink, curling and twisting as if alive. It didn't matter if the sink was empty, or if the water was running, it would always appear. Sometimes wet, sometimes dry, but always unsettlingly real. One afternoon, 3 students, Arav, Priya, and Kabir, dared to go into the bathroom and record whatever they saw. They laughed as they entered, their phone cameras rolling, but the laughter didn't last long. Priya turned on the tap. The water flowed normally for a second, then turned thick and dark, like ink. Arav gasped and pointed at the mirror, where something pale moved just out of view. Then, a clump of long, wet black hair slowly rose from the sink. It coiled and stretched upward, defying gravity. Priya screamed as a thin, bony hand shot up from the drain, its nails long and broken, reaching for her wrist. The 3 ran out, dropping the phone in their panic. When they came back with a teacher, the bathroom was empty, but the phone was still recording. They played the footage back. There was no hand, no hair, but there was a face. A woman's face, pale and gaunt, eyes hollowed and black. Her lips moved soundlessly, her expression blank. Then, just before the recording cut off, her mouth opened wide, too wide, stretching impossibly far, revealing nothing but darkness inside. The video was deleted the next day. No one spoke about it again. Miss Radha was one of the strictest teachers in school, but she was also the bravest. When she heard the students whispering about the bathroom ghost, she scoffed. "Ghosts aren't real," she said. And if they were, they wouldn't waste their time in school bathrooms. One evening, she stayed late grading papers. As she passed the second-floor bathroom, she heard it, a whisper. It was faint, almost like a breath against her ear. "Miss Radha," she froze. The hallway was empty. The school was nearly deserted. She turned toward the bathroom, her heart pounding. "Who's there?" she called. No answer. She stepped inside. The air was damp, humid in a way that made her skin prickle. The lights flickered. Drip, drip. The sinks were wet, though no one had used them in hours. A strand of black hair lay across the counter. Then, the faucet turned on by itself. Miss Radha stepped closer, frowning. The water ran clear for a moment, then turned red, thick, dark, like blood. She gasped and stepped back, but something was already moving. From the sink, something pale and human began to rise. First, a scalp, wet and glistening. Then, tangled black hair. Then, a face empty, hollow-eyed and grinning. Miss Radha screamed. The next morning, she was gone. No one ever saw her again. By now, the entire school was afraid. Students refused to go near the second-floor bathroom. Even the teachers avoided it. The principal eventually ordered it to be locked, but the whispering didn't stop. At night, the janitor reported hearing voices echoing down the halls, soft and pleading. "Help me. Let me out." And then, one night, he saw the face. It wasn't in the mirror. It wasn't in the sink. It was inside the drain. Something was trapped beneath the school. A few weeks later, an old librarian, who had worked at the school for decades, revealed a terrible truth. That bathroom was built over an old well, she whispered. A woman was murdered there years ago. They say she was drowned in that well, her body never recovered, but something of her remained. No one knew if it was true, but one thing was certain, something was still down there, something that hadn't been able to leave. But it was trying. Every night, the water pipes groaned. Every morning, strands of black hair were found clogging the sinks. And every now and then, if someone listened closely, they could hear it. A whisper from the drain, calling their name.
Everyone in town knew the stories about Blackwood High School. It stood deep in the woods, abandoned for years, its windows shattered, its walls covered in graffiti and decay. But long before it was a school, it was something Elsie Cemetery. The graves were paved over, the bodies exhumed and relocated, or at least that's what the officials claimed. But after construction finished and students began attending, strange things started happening. Objects moved on their own. Students heard their names whispered in empty hallways. Shadowy figures were seen in the windows at night. And then, one by one, students started disappearing. Some walked into the school one day and were never seen again. Others were found wandering the woods outside silent, eyes hollow, unable to recall what had happened to them. By the time Amy Patel and Roop Kaur decided to investigate, the school had been shut down for years. The official reason? Structural instability. But the truth was far worse, because the last two people who went inside never came back. Amy and Roop were best friends, inseparable since childhood. They loved horror movies, urban legends, and everything paranormal. When they heard about Blackwood High, it was an obvious challenge. "We should go in," Amy said one night, reading stories on a paranormal forum. "Film everything. Prove it's all just bullshit." Roop hesitated. "What if it's not bullshit?" Amy grinned. "Then we'll have the best ghost footage ever." It was a Friday night when they finally went. Armed with only their phones, flashlights, and a cheap camcorder, they headed into the woods, the silhouette of Blackwood High looming in the distance. The doors were locked, but a broken window near the science lab gave them an easy entrance. The moment they stepped inside, the temperature dropped. The air smelled of mold, rot, and something metallic. "God, it stinks in here," Roop whispered, covering her nose. Amy turned on her flashlight, sweeping the beam across dusty desks, overturned chairs, and old textbooks scattered across the floor. And then, from somewhere deep inside the school, a whisper. Low, faint, like a breath against the walls. Amy and Roop froze. "You heard that, right?" Amy whispered. Roop nodded. "We're not alone." They followed the sound, moving deeper into the school. Every hallway looked the same dark, endless, lined with lockers covered in rust and grime. Amy aimed her phone's camera forward. The night vision mode cast everything in an eerie green hue. Then she saw it. A figure standing at the far end of the hallway. Small, childlike, motionless. Amy's breath caught. "Roop, do you see that?" Roop turned her flashlight toward the figure, but it was gone. A metallic clang echoed as a locker swung open by itself. Inside was a blood-stained school uniform. And then, something knocked from inside the locker. Once, twice, 3 times. Amy grabbed Roop's wrist. "We need to get out of here." But when they turned, the hallway had changed. The entrance was gone. The school was twisting around them, pulling them deeper inside. Doors that had been locked were now open. Hallways stretched longer than they should. A staircase led down into the basement. "I don't want to go down there," Roop whispered. Amy swallowed. "Neither do I." But as they turned away, the whispering grew louder. Not a single voice, but dozens. Then, a door slammed shut behind them, forcing them toward the stairs. With no other choice, they descended. The basement was worse than the rest of the school. The walls were lined with old student photos, their faces faded and blurred. At the far end of the room stood a row of desks, and sitting at those desks were children. Not real children. Shadows. Distorted silhouettes, hunched over as if waiting for a lesson that would never come. Amy grabbed Roop's arm. "We need to go." But as they turned, a voice spoke from behind them. "Stay." A cold hand grabbed Amy's wrist. She gasped, yanking away, but no one was there. The air grew thick, heavy, suffocating. The shadows at the desks began to move, standing one by one. Their faces were empty. No eyes, no mouths. Just black, hollow voids. Roop screamed. She grabbed Amy's hand, pulling her toward the stairs, but the exit was gone. The walls were closing in. The whispers grew louder, turning into screeches. Then, Amy's phone screen glitched. The camera showed herself and Roop, but behind them, a tall, skeletal figure with a face like a decayed corpse. And then the lights went out. Days passed. Then, weeks. Amy and Roop's families searched for them. The police combed through Blackwood High and the surrounding woods. They found nothing. Eventually, the case was closed. Another urban legend. Another tragedy. The school was sealed off permanently. But at night, if you listen closely near the old building, you can still hear them. Amy and Roop. Their screams, faint but desperate. Their shadows, flickering behind the windows. Their whispers, calling for help. And somewhere, deep in that school, the thing that took them is still waiting. Waiting for the next ones. Waiting for someone new to enter. Because no one ever leaves. Not really.